Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're digging into the story behind Blackbox, the Dutch media platform.
Right, and specifically the recent split involving its founder, Flavio Pasquino, and his new venture, Lighthouse TV.
Exactly. We're working from excerpts of a recent YouTube interview with Flavio himself.
So, primary source material, essentially hearing his side of things.
Our mission today, to really unpack that journey, the business side, the funding, the conflicts, the vision.
And pull out the key insights for you, the listener, especially if you're interested in media, startups, or just, well, how these things can unfold.
Absolutely. And what strikes me immediately is this tension, isn't it, between the message, the business reality, and crucially, trust.
Oh, definitely. Trust seems to be the fault line here, running right through the organization.
So let's start at the beginning. Flavio's background, it wasn't originally in this kind of media, was it?
No, he came from live sports broadcasting, Eurosport. Quite different.
And the catalyst, it seems, was the pandemic. Specifically, how outdoor events were labeled super spreader events. That seemed to really push him.
Yeah, it disrupted his world and, well, sparked this move towards independent media.
He started really small, didn't he? Interviews in his Tesla, almost informal chats.
That's right. With people like Kees Vassen, Erwin Campaign, very organic, almost spontaneous beginnings.
It shows how when people feel mainstream channels aren't working, they just find a way. Use the tech they have.
Absolutely. That DIY spirit. He saw a need, well, felt a need, and just went for it.
And then it grew. From those Tesla talks to a proper show, Blackbox Today.
Professionally produced, funded by viewers, crowdfunding.
The aim was ambitious. Alternative views, but with, the polish of mainstream TV. Like RTL Boulevard was the comparison used.
Which is a big leap. Matching production values while offering a counter-narrative takes resources, takes skill. It shows real belief in the message.
Now, the structure they set up is interesting. You had the sticking the foundation for donations.
Right. And then the BV, the private company, handling the operations, the costs.
The idea, I suppose, was checks and balances. Flavio was director of the BV, but also on the foundation's board.
It's a common setup, trying to separate the nonprofit donation side from the, let's say, business activities.
But it adds complexity. And initially, because the stishing held the purse strings.
They held the power, effectively. Money talks, as they say, even in these structures.
Which brings us to 2024. The conflict. It was about the shares in the BV, wasn't it?
Yes. Flavio wanted to transfer them to the stishing, but he had one condition.
A board he trusted. A board he felt comfortable with, aligned with the vision.
And apparently that condition wasn't met. The trust wasn't there with the proposed board members.
So the outcome was quite stark. He resigned.
And then the entire staff followed him out the door.
Leaving, well, a strange situation. A BV with all the equipment, the studio, but no people.
And a stitching with the funds, the donations, but no operational team to actually make anything. Quite the stalemate.
It really hits home that a media platform isn't just the tech, is it? It's the team, the shared purpose.
Absolutely. The talent, the know-how, the collaborative spirit. Lose that, and the equipment doesn't mean much.
So our first key takeaway for you listening, think of this Blackbox story as a 4-year entrepreneurial roller coaster.
Definitely highs, like the audience connection, the growth, but serious lows too. Internal conflict, organizational breakdown.
It's a real case study in the challenges of scaling something, especially when it's mission-driven.
Yeah, even with a great idea and audience love, the internal stuff, governance, funding, relationships, that's often where things get tricky, critical for survival.
Let's dive deeper into how it actually got funded, especially early on.
Because it wasn't planned initially. It came from his personal need for answers during the pandemic.
Right, and viewers just started sending money to his personal account.
Exactly. Before any formal structure, it showed a really strong, direct connection with that early audience. They felt he was voicing their questions.
It wasn't slick marketing, it was raw response.
Totally. Then came the more formal setup, the Stichting, the BV.
And the Blackbox Buddy program. That sounds like a membership model.
Yeah, recurring donations. About 3,500 buddies, apparently. That gave some predictability.
Unlike the one-off donations, which could fluctuate wildly.
So the Stichting generally seemed to manage okay. Didn't overspend massively, based on his account.
But the BV, the operational side, that was different. Salaries, overheads.
That's where things got tighter. Sometimes the monthly costs were higher than what the Stichting transferred over.
So how did they cover the shortfall?
appeals, basically.
Yeah.
Asking the audience during broadcasts and sometimes specific crowdfunding campaigns, like for that helicopter.
Yes, the 30,000 euro for aerial footage of a protest.
It worked, sometimes, but it's quite an unconventional, maybe precarious way to run things day to day. Very reliant on audience goodwill.
Which brings us to key takeaway, #2, shifting priorities.
It seems Flavio started out very much as a, let's call it, journalist activist.
Focused on the message, challenging the narrative. The urgency of the pandemic was the driver.
Business models, sustainability, maybe that wasn't top of mind initially. And ironically, the crisis itself fueled the early donations.
But crises don't last forever, usually. Or at least the initial intensity fades.
And then you need a more stable footing, which they did start to explore, didn't they?
Yes, with Studio Paradiso. Events, cinema screenings, speakers charging fees.
A move towards actual commercial revenue. Taxed differently, 9% VAT, not just donations.
A step towards diversification, trying to build something more sustainable.
Definitely. Moving beyond just relying on viewer support.
But then there was this dispute about the finances. A board member mentioned a $17,000 monthly overspend. That sounds significant.
It does, but Flavio pushes back hard on that narrative.
He points to reserves, right? Bitcoin, profits.
Yeah, $150,000 in Bitcoin, he says. A consolidated profit of $100K reported in 2024, cash reserves. His view is that things weren't nearly as dire as presented.
So is it creative accounting or just different perspectives? Bookkeeping versus bank balance.
It could be different interpretations of financial health. Maybe the board member wanted a much larger safety net, more conservative accounting. Risk tolerance varies.
An entrepreneur might see assets and potential, while a board member focuses on liquidity, predictable income. It's a classic tension.
Exactly. But this disagreement clearly fed into the broader breakdown of trust.
And then came the cost-cutting, the sanering. What impact did that have?
Well, tangible impacts, like they cut the sound technician for the Friday talk show.
Ouch. Viewers noticed that stuff.
They did. Audio quality dropped. Feedback wasn't great. It shows the trade-off. Save money, but maybe damage the product that people value.
A difficult balance, especially with tight budgets.
Always. Quality costs money.
So, moving forward, Lighthouse TV, what's the plan there? Is it Black Box 2.0?
It sounds positioned to fill the gap Black Box left, at least in its current state.
Yeah.
Similar frequency, maybe 3 shows a week.
Same focus. Alternative perspectives, challenging narratives.
That seems to be the core idea, yes. Targeting that same audience that's skeptical of mainstream media.
But the structure is different this time.
Yes, leaner. Just a BV for now, no attached sticking. Less admin overhead seems to be the goal.
And crucially, Flavio retains full control.
100% ownership. That seems like a direct lesson learned from the Black Box experience. More autonomy.
He's also got this funding fathers and mothers idea. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. He's looking for 12 entrepreneurs to invest €25,000 each, plus VAT.
Okay, seed capital. But what do they get? Not shares, you said?
No equity, no formal control. Instead, they become part of an advisory group. Brainstorming, business model development, plus perks like using the studio.
So it's funding plus a kind of brains trust, access to experienced people.
Exactly. A way to get capital and expertise without giving up ownership. Pretty innovative, actually.
What about the echo chamber criticism? Is Lighthouse aiming to bring in more diverse views?
Well, he points to past efforts at Black Box, mentioning guests like Mahir Alka, Andre Garretts, Thomas Brooding. Diverse names there.
But he admits it's hard, getting people with really different views to come on.
Yeah, that's a constant challenge for alternative platforms. Building bridges, creating a space for real debate across divides is tough, requires sustained effort.
And the name, Lighthouse TV, that sounds different. Less confrontational than Black Box.
Seems intentional. Lighthouse suggests guidance, clarity, maybe something more positive. They're also planning a lighter visual style, a different tone.
So a deliberate rebranding effort. Maybe trying to broaden the appeal.
Could be. Moving away from any baggage associated with the Black Box name or conflicts.
And Flavio's very clear. He's keeping 100% control for now.
Yes, to ensure the mission stays consistent. He mentioned maybe strategic partnerships later, but control is key for him right now.
Understandable, given the history.
Absolutely. Safeguarding the vision.
Now, looking back, there was criticism about Black Box becoming too big, too expensive. Does he address that?
He does. Acknowledges that maybe, in hindsight, a leaner setup in one location might have been better.
But it grew organically, right? Different boards involved over time.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily designed that way from day one. It evolved. And he points out the rent wasn't actually that high compared to, say, Amsterdam.
So maybe the scale itself wasn't the core issue, but how it was managed.
Perhaps. Organic growth can lead to complexity if not actively streamlined along the way.
What about the format? Lighthouse TV will continue with live broadcasts.
For news and current affairs, yes, that's a strategic choice.
Why live? It's more expensive, more demanding.
He feels it's crucial for immediacy, covering breaking news, reacting quickly. Pre-recorded doesn't offer that flexibility in fast-moving situations.
So valuing that real-time connection with events and the audience.
Exactly, even with the extra cost and pressure.
And what's his view on Black Box's future now? Does he see it competing?
Not directly, it seems. He thinks Black Box will need to reinvent itself, find a complementary niche.
Why? Because the team left.
Primarily, yes. He sees the loss of the core team, the know-how, as a huge hurdle for Black Box to operate as it did before.
So the human capital drain is significant.
Hugely significant in his view.
And just to reiterate, the main reason he left, according to him, wasn't the money arguments.
No, he emphasizes it was the breakdown of trust. That fundamental lack of trust with the new board, that was the catalyst.
He also mentions Black Box is currently non-active. What does that imply?
Well, it suggests operations have largely ceased, at least for now. The equipment sits idle without the team. It raises questions about its viability long-term.
Does he express any regrets about how things went down?
Yes, specifically about not having more control over selecting that new stitching board. He sees that as a mistake, not securing that alignment.
Interesting. A failure in the handover process, essentially.
It highlights how crucial leadership transitions and governance are, getting the right people in place, ensuring shared vision.
He also mentioned a clash over direction, didn't he? The first board wanting a shift.
Yeah, apparently they wanted Black Box to move away from analysis towards more of a standard news journal format. He disagreed with that shift.
Another layer to the conflict, not just trust, but strategy, too.
Seems so. Differing ideas about what Black Box should actually be.
So his description of Black Box now is pretty bleak. A hollow shell.
That's his assessment. Got the gear, but missing the essential ingredient, the experienced team to make it work at its previous level.
Again, underscoring the people aspect.
Absolutely. Tech is just a tool.
Looking ahead then, Flavio's vision for Lighthouse TV seems based on a core belief.
Yeah, but as the world gets, in his words, crazier, and people question mainstream narratives more.
There will be a growing audience for a consistent, thoughtful alternative like Lighthouse TV aims to be.
He's betting on that continued or even increased demand for different perspectives and deeper analysis. If they deliver quality, the audience will come.
Okay, let's wrap up with our final thought for you, the listener.
Given everything we've discussed,
How can truly independent media, often born from idealism, actually strike that balance between the mission, the message, and the money? The practical realities of staying afloat.
especially in today's polarized landscape, what are the trade-offs? You've got the pressure for instant news, maybe more sensational stuff.
Versus the slower, more resource-intensive work of in-depth analysis and context.
Yeah.
Where do you personally find the real value?
It's a big question. What models actually work to support quality independent voices without compromising integrity or just chasing clicks? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah.
Maybe check out Lighthouse TV, see how their approach develops, and compare it for yourself. Engage critically with all your sources.
Indeed. Be your own editor, in a way.